discussion we will have here on EPALE. I am Claudia Deramo of the editorial staff of the platform, and I'm here with my colleague Sara Saleri, you will get to know in a while, to introduce you to this conversation. The current Ukrainian crisis has shaken our idea of safety and democracy that we were used to experience within Europe and also around Europe. We are still in the middle of this never-ending COVID-19 crisis, and the Russian invasion of the state of Ukraine has now shocked the world, has now shocked us, and is costing lives of civilians, and is forcing people to flee their homes and to flee their country. And the European states, we are seeing, are responding with great solidarity and great compassion, welcoming refugees in our countries in this special emergency situation. Actually, this week, Russia even quit the Council of Europe, which is the continent's leading human rights body. Well, it actually happened just a minute before the organization itself was excluding Russia because of the Ukrainian invasion. And of course, then we have this firm reaction of the European Union to stand with Ukraine and to sanction Russia in this special situation. President von der Leyen shared a few weeks ago some measures to respond to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, well, starting from shutting down the European airspace for Russians to excluding Russian banks from the SWIFT system, which means actually to prevent it from financing Putin's war. And then we have other important measures, one really connected to this conversation, which is to banish in the European countries the Russian toxic and harmful disinformation media machine, as she called it. And we will talk about misinformation and propaganda also today. And of course, Europe is mobilizing every effort to support member states to host refugees in a sense of full solidarity among Europe. And then since we are on EPALE and we talk about culture, learning and young adults also on EPALE this year, our commissioner, Maria Gabriel, recalled how Erasmus Plus exchange programs and the European Solidarity Corps have been promoting during all these years mutual understanding and solidarity among people from all countries and with different backgrounds. She also has presented some specific measures to support students, educators, teachers in these challenging times. You can find their statements on EPALE on the homepage, and we shared it a few days ago. So we, EPALE, as the European community of adult learners, adult educators, professionals and practitioners, we wanted to respond to your call for sharing and cooperating in this special situation, your need for collecting resources and sharing practices in this situation, but in crisis situations more in general that we are getting used to. So we launched this special campaign, this Ukraine campaign, to support your practices in crisis context. And we started with this online discussion that will help us reflect on crisis education, humanitarian actions, misinformation, and trainings. And to do so, we have invited three experts, three strong, powerful women to share their views and their experiences with us, with the EPALE community. We will have Boba Markovic Balukova of Umbrella organization from Slovakia. She's a communicator, she's a researcher, and she's currently working at the border. And she will share with us some thoughts and some expertise. Also, we have Elena Pacetti of the University of Bologna from Italy. She's a professor, and she has also extended experiences in transnational projects on these topics. And Gudrun Van Pottelbergh of Prepared International, which is an organization working on getting prepared to crisis situation, and she has an extended background in this topic. So for the next 40 minutes, they will guide us through different angles, different shades of aspects to be covered and to be trained on in crisis situations more in general. You can start commenting on the platform, and we invite you to do so. Also to have the chance to interact with our experts and to select some of the questions to be addressed to them. And don't forget, please, to contribute to the written discussion also this afternoon or in the next few days, since we will leave the written discussion open also to collect and share resources, links, contributes, and projects in the next few days. And we think it's a really useful tool for you and your peers. And now my colleague Sara Saleri of the editorial staff of EPALE will guide you through this conversation and will kickstart the discussion. So Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia, for this presentation and for explaining our community what we are doing as a whole in EPALE to tackle this situation from our perspective, of course. And so let me start with the BOBA. At first, when we contacted Boba Markovic-Balukova, we knew that she was an expert in media literacy programs, and of course, we wanted to touch upon this very important issue of misinformation and propaganda. But then, when we started talking with her, and when she invited, and when she told us that she was participate in this discussion, she also told us that she's currently working on the border between Slovakia and Ukraine. So the fact of being here, her presence here became even more important than we thought at first. So we would like to start exactly with that. So I'd like to start asking Boba what is the current situation she is experiencing, what she's doing with her organization there, and what are the main challenges she sees in this situation now, especially from an educational perspective. So let us know, Baba.
Hello, everyone. So I have been working for a platform for development organizations called Umbrella with letter A. And it's actually really umbrella organization of 28 non-governmental organizations from Slovakia, dedicated to humanitarian aid, development cooperation, and global education. And in June, we were supposed to finish our project, EU-funded project called Faces of Migration as a part of Global Goals and Migration Consortia. And my responsibility as a communications manager and journalist and researcher was to raise an awareness of Slovak people about reasons and ways of migration through the prism of international development. And our team creates and shares stories of people from abroad, mostly migrants and refugees, to explain to our Slovak population what people fleeing their homes experience and why they need our help, our support, our acceptance. Many Slovak citizens have never met a foreigner in their town or village. They did not get the concept of asylum seeker or refugee status. They are quite afraid of unknown. And our campaign, Faces of Migration, was a first step to think about it, to start to open the discussion. But at the end of February, when a war started in our neighboring country, situation has completely changed. In the first week of Russian invasion, first 100,000 people from Ukraine crossed the Slovak border. And there will be, of course, more people on the run. So the topic of forced migration cannot be avoided anymore. Children at school, elderly people at home are asking questions. What does it mean to experience war? What is war? How to react to war? How to accept or talk to refugees? So Umbrella members with an expertise in global education, they immediately started to organize webinars and produce leaflets, guidelines, infographics to cover this topic and to support parents and teachers too. We also organized online discussion on how Slovak NGOs helping Ukrainian people coming to Slovakia. So our umbrella organizations gathers 28 NGOs in the field of global education, humanitarian aid, and development cooperation. And those with expertise in humanitarian aid are, since the day one of the Russian invasion, on the borders, on free border crossings. And they have been implementing projects in eastern part of Ukraine since 2014. So they know the needs of local people. They work closely with their partners. So we must now make good use of their expertise. So those people with expertise in humanitarian aid are on the borders. They built tents there and helping people fleeing Ukraine with registration forms, connecting them with families, securing them a safe transport and accommodation, offering them hot drinks and food, dry and warm clothes, but also psychosocial support and assistance with kids. But many organizations are there. They are already expressing tiredness, exhaustedness, burnout. So they will soon need to be replaced by other people and supported by human, also financial capacities. There are so many volunteers dedicated to the cause, but at the same time, they are learning by doing how to help people on the run. So it's really challenge for educators and us, all of us, to prepare volunteers to do their job even better and more effective. So Umbrella is the most active and effective in the field of advocacy, capacity building, and awareness raising, and it's acting as a coordination body. Gathering and analyzing and information from the borders, from our members, and trying to negotiate a secure corridor for humanitarian aid directly to Ukraine. So that's our main goal right now.
Thank you, Barbara, for this portrait of a situation which is, of course, from the ground, of a situation which is overwhelming. From all points of view, emotionally, practically, and from the educational point of view, of course. And after we all know these numbers, after 3 weeks, we have more than 3 million refugees who were forced to flee from Ukraine. So it is a situation that seems overwhelming, that we have to tackle somehow. We know that a lot of pressure is on the bordering countries, especially Poland, Slovakia, as you're saying, but also the other ones. But of course, it's something that affects all Europe, and we have to consider as adult educators. So we have. I'd like to pass now to Elena on this topic. We actually have a question from the audience, from Alexandra. She was asking what can adult training providers do to face the new waves of individuals who need help and who eventually will adapt to people who've previously fed. So she's in this message, Alexandra shows the preoccupation also of how to prepare the citizens of Europe to these different kind of waves of people flowing away from their countries. And so it is I'd like to ask Elena, what are the priorities you see in for adult educators, for educators in general in this moment, And of course, in the context of hosting refugees, which of course is not only from Ukraine, but it's something that has also been happening for a long time now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to Alexandra for this very challenging question, actually, because I think in this crisis moment, we are working in the emergency, but it's not easy, to manage and to give a list of priorities with the risk to forget something very, very, very important. Of course, during an emergency like the one we are all living in Europe, and especially the people from Ukraine, we try to provide essential support. We try to address the primary needs, houses, food, a safe place to stay, healthcare, and so on. But of course, education is always a priority. And we can see that many countries are working in this direction, welcoming students of every age in their school system, from early childhood to university in different ways and in different moments, of course. So from my point of view, we can consider two different priorities in the perspective of adult learning and education. The first one, in my opinion, is the importance to valorize skills and competencies of adult refugees and to give value to their expertise, involving them as active experts in managing the emergency. Because in this moment, we have adults coming from Ukraine, mainly women, we know, and they are arriving, or they are already arrived in several countries in Europe. They had to escape from Ukraine and left their jobs, but these adults are competent and they were working previously in different fields. So I'm thinking that they could really contribute to the management of the emergency and to feel active citizens, active participants to the management of the emergency. For instance, if I think about my field, so schools and universities, I think that there are educators and teachers from Ukraine with a wide range of expertise and experiences. And educators from Ukraine could be able to contribute according to their own capabilities. They could support local teachers in mediating the welcoming of schools, classmates and pupils from Ukraine, or they could support university professors, so myself also, in orientation in the admission process, in teaching and co-teaching with us. So in this way, they could be not only beneficiaries, but really active protagonists of their future and of the future of their fellow citizens. The second priority I can see is, of course, related to social inclusion and vulnerable persons in emergencies, and the quality of learning and social opportunities we can provide to people. So my questions are our educators prepared to manage crisis? Is our society more in general prepared to host refugees and include them? Of course, Boba was explaining us the way Umbrella is working in this direction, and this is something unbelievable, really. But I also see the need also to support and prepare and educate communities to welcome and include refugees at different level. We need to develop social, emotional, and interpersonal skills, what we call the transversal skills. And we really see how these are important in this moment. Skills like empathy, flexibility, resilience, creativity, active listening to others, with this open approach and with the aim to support people respecting their dignity, their culture, and their abilities, And of course, this is much more important for teachers and educators that should also be prepared to create a learning climate, a positive learning climate, and in challenging these realities and include new students. And so the training trainers is really a key issue, and not only during crisis. Of course, it is very important now, but we have to think about the future also. And we have to be prepared to deal with this uncertainty, because unfortunately we live an age of crisis. We were just nearly finishing the pandemic, which was, of course, also a big issue to deal with, but we are in another kind of crisis, and we live at the age of exclusion. And of course, we need to prepare ourselves and to prepare children, prepare young adults, students, the civil society in this situation. So I would like also to underline another possible way to get some information and some resources and tools, which is INI, the Interagencies Network for Education in Emergencies, which is a global network with more than 18,000 members working in the organization, NGO, government, Ministry of Education, United Nations personnel, and so on. And in this network, is it possible to find a lot of tools and resources and guidelines about how to support in the field of education and also in the field of psychology in emergency people at all ages. And I think this must be really a topic to discuss in the future. In my department, we are part of a transnational cooperation project on capacity building in the field of higher education, and we work in the Philippines in the development of a curriculum in teaching in emerging challenge areas. We didn't want to talk about just emergencies or in a negative way, but we are talking about challenges. So I think in education we have to be prepared to confront in all these challenges we are living, because education needs to prepare people and to teach the complexity and the way to deal with challenges in our times.
Thank you, Elena. Thanks a lot for this perspective. I really appreciate the fact of providing this perspective to refugees as competent persons. So just going beyond the idea of the victim, which is also of course something that we should interrogate about. So this fact of giving back the agency is really very important. And also wanted to tell our viewers that we will be sharing the links to INE that you were mentioning, as well as the other associations and links that will be mentioned by our speakers. But I'd like to now to pass to Gudrun. We have been talking about, something that has resonated in different, both in Boba's and Elena's speeches, is being prepared. So the fact of being prepared, it's something that is quite important. And as we know, and Gudrun has worked extensively exactly on this issue. So on preparing citizenships and population to risk and to emergencies. We actually also have a comment on EPALE by Dora, who is precisely, I think, goes to what Gudrun can tell us. So how do we prepare to be more resilient? And what is expected of us? Is that we are resilient, or above all capable of acting quickly and pragmatically? So what does it mean to be resilient, and what are the skills necessary for the populations to be prepared? I mean, to changes and to risks. So I'd like to pass this question to you, Gudrun, and so also, of course, sharing your experiences and widening a little bit the perspective from also the current situation to other situations that you have lived and you have worked on.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you to EPALE to inviting Prepared International and myself to this important and very timely discussion, I would say. In order for me to answer the question of Dora, and thank you very much, Dora, for that question, let me take a step back, to what is going on at the moment in Europe as such. And that is something that I've been observing in the last 10 to 15 years, unfortunately. And that is that latest by Ukraine, we can see that we are living in a changed Europe. It is not a statement that I make easily as an academic historian. You're very careful with making big statements. But what have we seen in the last 5 to 7 years? We've seen 2015 migration crisis. We have seen 2020 COVID crisis. We have seen forest fires in the south of Europe. We have seen 2021 summer floods in Belgium and in Germany and in the Netherlands. And now we see a full-fledged war in Europe, in the backyard of Europe as such. And I have to say, honestly, as an international humanitarian professional, as an international crisis manager, these are all things that we did not see coming. Yeah, we have to be honest about that. Yeah, we have prepared for so many things, but still there are other things always happening as such. But what does that mean is that we have to come to terms with that Europe is not immune for crisis and conflicts. I think for the past 25 years, we have lived in a world where we wanted to believe that as such, but now we clearly see that no, crisis and conflict is not something, just for the other side of the world. It's also something that we have to deal with, we have to live with as such. What does that mean in terms of preparedness as such? In the work of Prepared International, indeed, we work a lot with governments and societies to help them to prepare their emergency response capacities as such, including the preparedness and resilience of communities. And in all that work, we see that there is one extremely important condition for any of these preparedness efforts to work and to be successful. And that is that we have to take it seriously. Up until a few years, it was very challenging to tell the population in Europe, like, okay, you cannot build next to a river, or you have there's sirens every Saturday. They are there for a reason. Or you have to have some batteries or radios in your house in case of. It's very difficult to sell that, to convince them of that. Fortunately, the recent crisis and recent events have forced us, to take this seriously, to come to terms with that, that it is very confrontational. Yeah, but this is what happened, the populations in Belgium and Germany, they never thought, that something like that, floods like that, could take place. And still, 8 months later, you still see the consequences in that region as such. So that is something that for emergency preparedness work is a good thing, a positive thing, that we finally take it seriously, that there's finally this degree of awareness that indeed Europe is not immune as such. What does that mean? What can we expect? That indeed the interest will be growing, but also the resilience will be growing in the years to come because of that recent experience. Yeah, I think also if you look at the generation of our kids, they grow up in a crisis situation and they are taking this much easier than we do. Yeah, they are running around with a mask. They get used to tests. This is their life. So they are already much more resilient than we are, or the generation before us, as such. Third point: what does that mean for education? What does that mean for training, as such? 3 issues here. I think first we need to adapt our mindset. Crisis and conflict is not something that only happens, at the other side of the world. It's not something exotic anymore. It's something that we have to live with. Yeah, it is there, and it's probably not going to go away. Yeah. It also means that we need to adapt our training material to the practice in Europe. Often, in the past years, I've always been teaching IHL, International Humanitarian Law, as something very distant. Last week, I was teaching to the EU Aid Volunteers Initiative, and I've never, ever had a session on international humanitarian law that was so easy to give. I just had to open the website of the ICRC. You saw the press releases. Yeah? So we need to adapt our training material as well to, showcase the examples, that are happening in Europe. Finally, it also means for the big international organizations that also they have to adapt their work, their working modalities, their guidelines, to crisis response in Europe. Yeah, we have seen maybe more in 2015 migration crisis. We were not prepared as such. Now we take the lessons learned of 2015, and we're already a bit better in responding to the incoming migrants and refugees as such. So we are learning, but still there's a lot, left to be learned as well. Civil protection. Again, floods in Germany, we felt very lost. We had many international responders, years of UN experience, all the necessary trainings as such. But then when it happens in your own country, we realize we don't have those coordination mechanisms. So there's a lot, left that we have to do, that we have to learn as such. So what does it mean in terms of resilience? We have to take the opportunity. I know it's rather strange to say in the current context as such, but we have to think ahead, and use what is happening at the moment to prepare for future events as such, to work with young people, to work with adult learners as well, to prepare those communities to really, as I said, use the opportunity. That is, I think, something that we at least can do to make sure that we at least are prepared, or a bit better prepared, for what's coming ahead. I hope that helped.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course, Gudrun, that was a very interesting and, context also, perspective also, the fact of course, having to come to terms with change is something that also has to do with the way of seeing, our world, to be educated in some. And also, of course, your experience and your perspective, I think, has greatly enriched our conversation. Also, when you talk about the fact of having to do different actors, of course, working together. So that's also something important that actually Dora was also mentioning in her comment. We couldn't put it all here. And so now we have some comments from our users who are commenting, and there is one about from Etelberto, who is actually one of our EPALE ambassadors. This work showed us some emergent outcomes. Communication is critical for understanding each other, and education for peace is much needed. So I'd like to ask this one to Boba, and maybe starting from this also providing us some hints and some ideas on how media literacy skills and critical thinking can help. In this situation, we know that disinformation is playing also a big role in this conflict. So I'd like to know your view, and I know it's an expert one. So.
Yeah, I will go for it. I will start with an example. You already said that as of today, around 3 million people have fled to neighboring countries. So Poland, Slovakia, Moldova, Romania, Hungary are under the pressure. But we sometimes forget about those people who are not European Union country citizens. So among those 3 million people, Ukrainian people, there were 127,000 third country nationals, and they also need critical humanitarian support and protections. In Umbrella, in our platform, we are aware that tens of thousands of young people from low-income countries, from Africa, Asia, Middle East, they studied at Ukrainian in universities. So not only Ukrainian citizens are fleeing Ukraine, but also medical students from Ghana, Libya, IT students from India. They are also on the run. They are in shock. They need our attention, our help and support. Therefore, different skin color, culture, or religion should not be an obstacle to the help shown, and we must treat them equally. Unfortunately, some members of Slovak extremist political parties already filmed those students on the borders and featured them in their manipulated videos as a potential threat to Slovak nation. And it's a classical example of disinformation practice of those groups of extremists. They did the same in 2015 during the so-called refugee crisis on the Balkan route. So there are already those hoaxes about refugees fleeing Ukraine and trying to steal our women, our work, to gain social benefits, bring Islam to our country and terrorism, etc. There are also other hoaxes like the West needs war to feed the economy. The NATO and EU are provocateurs and other hoaxes. What are the pillars of Russian propaganda or pro-Kremlin propaganda? There are four main pillars. First one is the West is always guilty. Russia always defends itself. And there is a bipolar world. You are either for the USA or for Russia. Nothing else exists, nothing between. And there is also very interesting strategy or feature called whataboutism. So those discuters on Facebook, they use the questions to mislead you and avoid the real problem with the question. And what about US operations in Iraq? What about black people killed in the US by white people? And what about expelling US ambassadors instead of Russian ambassadors and stuff like that? And what they would like to achieve with those hoaxes, fake stories and disinformation to justify Russia's military aggression in Ukraine, including attacks on civilians, to force the Slovak Republic or other European Union countries to refrain from humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine, to discourage Slovak public from helping Ukrainian refugees, to destroy their kindness and solidarity. And last week, Gerulata Technologies, Slovak company, published a list of top pro-Russian information sources in Slovakia, just to help Slovak authorities, NGOs and citizens to understand the process and to counter this propaganda. It's not the list of trolls or foreign agents. It's just the list of sources spreading pro-Russian narratives, like Kremlin is just doing special military operation and denazification of Ukraine, or those websites, conspiracy websites, are spreading information where they relativize the war or relativize dead people and victims of the war, they blame the West and undermine the Western support for Ukraine. And what can we do about it? How to counter it? It's good to watch national media and statements of official bodies, not to believe information published by private accounts or Russian media like Sputnik or Russia Today. Work on prevention and systematically address those topics and adjust education in schools to teach critical thinking, argumentation skills, media and information literacy basics, soft skills, really to build critical thinking and set also media and information literacy guidelines for teachers, for politicians and their spokespersons. And solution to all of that, it's really media and information literacy, ability of people to analyze, evaluate, and create media products. It's a lifelong process. I know it's very dynamic experience, but really media and information literacy can help us to understand how media messages shape our culture and society, how develop critical thinking skills, how to identify targeted marketing strategies, how to recognize all those lies, bias, disinformation, fake stories, propaganda, and also how to create and distribute your own media messages. So just think that information is socially constructed. It's always influenced by cultural, political, economic, and social context, and there is always an intention beyond the provided information and published story. Even non-profit, even our umbrella has a purpose to create and share media product. So just be aware that there is this pro-Kremlin propaganda going on Facebook, and use the critical thinking and ask the experts, check the websites dedicated to media and information literacy, and think twice, take care before share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Baba. Yeah, I saw that there is also a campaign by the UN on verifying before sharing, and I think we will also share I will share it later on the comment section. And yeah, I think in that sense, but in all your what you were telling, I mean the fact of personal relevance and personal responsibility is central. So the fact that we are all producers of information, so we have a responsibility also in our little acts of sharing and we have to be actively thinking about that before. So that's central, I think. So thanks, Boba. We are I think we are raising many topics and issues. We have some questions from in our comments. We will not be able to take them all, but as said, when we finish the stream, the conversation will be going in writing, so we will be following there. But we would like to take a final comment by Elena, who I think appeals to some topics that have already been shared before, and probably both Gudrun and Elena will have something to tell about that. It's about the work of volunteers. So the work of volunteers during a crisis is demanding and intense. Volunteers have to reach into their reserves and perceive and adapt to what is happening around them. So of course, this has to do both with training the volunteers, but also with our resources as persons, as educators. So I think it touches upon different aspects of the work of volunteers and of who wants to be active. So do you want to say a word? Maybe let's start with Elena and then Gudrun about that, or also commenting on what has been said now.
As a university professor, I'm working with young adults, we can say. So I think, and I teach also citizenship education and active participation. So I think really this is the moment to realize in practice what we learn in theories in our university, for instance, but not only universities. So of course, you need to be prepared, no, in what they need. So I think the role of volunteer is a lot the one of listening, and there is a need, of course, of somebody managing this situation, because as a volunteer you can bring your expertise, and this can be an expertise in many different. No, I think we need also, as Baba was mentioning, we need volunteers also in the field of media communication. So we need people preparing for advices, for communication, for anything also related to media literacy. So it's not always a question of somebody practically going to the borders and helping there. No, we need volunteers at all levels, and I think we need to confront to the possibility that everyone can be a volunteer at different levels. So starting, of course, for young people, because we see them as the one with more time for that. But I think it's important to reflect on how we can contribute during this crisis, because everyone can contribute somehow. So I think Gudrun can, of course, add something more specific on training the volunteers.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for this question. Indeed, volunteers is an important part of humanitarian assistance. We all know volunteers working with the Red Cross, of course. Maybe some of you are indeed doing that. From my experience, it is important, though, to offer a framework for volunteers. Let's maybe call it that way as such. So I've also been training quite a lot of EU aid volunteers, which are indeed volunteers as such, but they're not sent to the field, without any framework, without any support. And I think it's also important to realize that if we look now at a response to Ukraine as such, absolutely, we need volunteers. We need that goodwill as such. However, we should not forget that the most important thing is that we provide quality support to the people that are in need. Yeah. So the volunteers, it's good they want to help, but the most important is that we provide quality assistance. And for that, I think there are a number of responsibilities, both for the volunteer and for the organization. I think the volunteer should know in advance a bit, what he or she, is entering as such. Yeah, this is not an adventure. Yeah, this is real stuff. You will see suffering as such. This is not always easy to cope with. So you have to know your limits as a volunteer. Yeah, if not, you get burned out, and you're not helping anybody as such anymore. Yeah, and that is also the responsibility of the organizations. And again, Red Cross is, of course, very good at that because they have so much experience with volunteers. Yeah, for the organization to provide that support, to provide that training, even if it's an hour or two, to explain what we're doing, and also extremely important to provide psychological support whenever it's needed. Yeah, I've seen many cases in evaluation work, for example, at the Greek islands as well, where there were volunteers, pulling out the people and the bodies, from the sea, but then they were left alone. That is also not something that is not correct. Yeah, it is not in line with professional humanitarian work. Yeah, so volunteers are very good, but at a certain moment, it's no longer charity work. Yeah. It has to be up to the standard. It has to be professional as such. So it's a very fine balance, how to, take on that goodwill, but then make sure that we do whatever we have to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Gudrun, for adding this point, which is absolutely central, because we were actually also discussing that in our prior conversations with Elena, talking about how sometimes being good-willed and wanting to help, sometimes we do not respect the other persons. We tend sometimes also to make these this portrait of the victim, which is not completely respectful of the other person. So there are many many layers that have to be added, and that volunteers have to be aware before acting. So thanks for adding all these different complications to what is to do humanitarian aid, and to how to tackle this crisis. So we have already spoken, I think, beyond what we had planned, but of course the conversation was so interesting and had so many aspects to touch upon that we didn't want to limit it to a certain time, but we have a final comment. Maren was thanking for the wide range of options for discussions, from peace education to media literacy. So I'm glad that this was also, as Claudia was saying before, also one of our first steps to start thinking about the main topic, the main aspects that as EPALE we will have to work on in this moment, that are central for our adult educators community. So we hope we have launched some teams, we have opened questions, and I'd like to remind everyone that we are going to continue this conversation on EPALE, on this same page of this streaming, and we will go on until today afternoon at 4. But of course, we can keep on discussing, and the conversation will be there, the video will be there, so it will become, I hope, one of the resources for our thinking and for our reflection in these hard times. So let me thank again very much Boba, Elena and Gudrun for their kind presence here, for their expertise, and for sharing with us all these experiences. So thanks again, and see everyone on EPALE.
Thank you.